I'm Richard and welcome to ZP Productions, and today is a follow-up video for the Canon EOS R3. Now, if you have not seen my previous video, do click on the link up at the corner because that will cover some of the synthetic tests and some basic thoughts, physical aspect of the Canon EOS R3. Now, the R3 has already been launched. I noticed that some of you have already gotten it. Some of you are in the process of considering to purchase it or not. The thing is, I'm a portrait photographer. There are certain things that I will test, especially if it's of a portraiture, but there are certain things that I may not cover because I don't do such shoots. So today's video will focus on certain aspects of the camera. Firstly, I will talk about autofocus. Then I will share my experience with 3 photo shoots. Now, these are mainly sharing and some photos, but they are quite diverse. Firstly, they are night shoot using LED lights. Secondly, available light in daytime. Lastly, studio shoot with strobes. And in that shoot, I will actually show you the difference between electronic shutter and mechanical shutter for the purpose of flash sync. I also have a bonus category at the end. If you want to know what is it, stay on and take a look at the video to the end. Now, first, let's talk about autofocus. In this category, I will talk a little bit more than just portraiture, but my focus is still portraiture, but autofocus just can't be about portraits. So let's take a look at the first one. So this is a photo shoot of Akira, and in any photo shoot, I will have some action shots, which is her spinning the head and then getting all messy with the hair. So the flag photos are the ones that are not sharp, and most importantly for such a shoot, usually is how fast does the camera take to capture the eye, and of course the eye is not always in the frame. So to be fair, I will give the camera a certain time, the moment it sees it, how many frames. And for the R3, it is really quick. By the way, the R3 shoots at 30 frames per second. And if you notice here, the eye has not appeared yet. And the moment the eye appears, which is just slightly, it takes only 1 frame before the camera actually moves to the eye. And in fact, I can show you now. Look, the eye is actually sharp and it's behind a thick strand of hair. Now, this situation, I would say as the A1 will probably focus on the hair in front, especially if you are using a shallow lens. Take a look at my aperture here. This is f1.8. And the A1 has a high chance that it will focus on this strand of hair here. That is my personal experience. But the R3, same as the R5, tends to be more sensitive towards the eye itself. And the R3 especially is capturing so fast, it takes only 1 frame to actually lock onto the eye in this sequence itself. Now for this sequence, there are some weird stuff that happened. It just decided to lose focus for a while and then lock on the back eye after that. So why did that happen? I'm not too sure. You see, it just lost focus here. Maybe it's because the hair is covering the face now and then it goes crazy. So that is my experience with the shoot for this particular sequence. The next one I'll show you is this sequence here. Same thing, it's a half body shot, and to be fair, let's take a look at before the eye appears. The eye have not appeared yet. And in this case, the moment the eye appeared for this half body shot, it appeared a little bit, just peeking out. Now it is fully in view with the camera. And then it's still out of focus, but the next frame is in focus already. And in this case, let me zoom in again and let you see again, just to make sure it is in focus. Now, the thing is that this is shot at f1.2, as you can see here. In fact, let me close this. It's just very distracting. You can see this is f1.2, and if you try to focus a lens at f1.2, especially the Canon f1.2, you should know that it is not trivial to actually shift the lens so quickly. So it takes about 2 frames from the eye appearing to lock on, which is a very good result. Once again, the R3 is shooting at 30 frames a second. So you have to consider that this is less than a frame for cameras that shoot 10 frames a second, and the camera has already locked on to the eye itself. So for this sequence, there's nothing special. It was on to the end, so nothing to talk about. So let's talk about some other stuff. So I went downstairs and shoot some cars because that's the only way I can shoot things that are moving away from me, because that's the harder one. Shooting sideways is not as challenging. In this case, when you shoot portraiture, it's really sudden appearance, but cars are things that move quickly away from me. So let's take a look at the cars. So I shot this sequence. Let me zoom out, and you can see this is a Porsche. Okay, it's out in the road here. I can tell you that I just move it really quick, and you can see that the Porsche is in focus all the way to the end. Let me see, which frame am I? See, even if when the back plate is actually blocked by the car, it's still in focus. In fact, let me zoom in, and you can still read the word Porsche and of course see the characters in the license plate. So this is really quite impressive. I mean, even certain occlusion do not make you lose focus for the car plate itself. Now the next one is even more impressive, the next test. And this is when a car just appeared the other side of the road and it starts moving. Now the difference is that this side of the road has a lot of things in the way between me and the car. And I can show you now. Let's move forward. 30 frames a second. At around this point, let me show you. Let me move forward a more. At around this point, it actually starts losing focus. Notice that the car plate is no longer sharp anymore. And then it remains not sharp for the next frame. But the frame after that, where the car actually appears a little bit more to this other side, for some reason it went in focus again. So it only lost 2 shots in like a 100 over frame sequence. No, of course not. It lost a few more shots later. And that's because there are a lot of things in this section here. So moving forward again, let me just jump to the back. It's still in focus. And then I believe it's the signboard here that is actually occluding the car significantly. I think that the vehicle detection on the algorithm for the R3 is actually focusing on the car plate. So it missed the car, missed the car, missed the car, missed the car. And the moment significant amount of car clear the line, it goes back in focus here. Now, even then, the back of the car is still occluded by certain items, but, the focusing engine can actually pick up the car itself. And thereafter, all the shots are in focus already. All the way to the end here. That's 100 shots, I think. Or is it 90 shots? And out of this 90 shot sequence, only those that are significantly occluded has some out of focus parts. And the other shot here is where a car just passed by me. And I have to say the truth that there is not a single out of focus shot for this 100+ shot sequence. Let me go all the way to the end when the car is quite far away. Now this is a road, and I would say as the cars are traveling like 40 km/h, up to 50 km/h at times. But they're not traveling super quick because this is just a side road, in my neighborhood itself. But that being said, really, the autofocus sharpness and ability of the R3 is really good. I mean, for 85 1.2, I'm always shooting at 1.2, by the way. To miss focus is not hard, especially if you look back into the previous frames, especially the one that is occluded. If you actually zoom in, you see that the front of the car is actually soft, the back of the car is soft. Because it's a 1.2 lens, when it's out, you can tell it's out. So for a lens of such aperture size and such slow autofocus, the R3 can still keep it quite there with the action itself. That is a really impressive thing from the R3 and of course the 85 1.2 RF. And now that's really about it for autofocus. I will do more tests in the future and then I'll share with you my results then. So the next one I'll talk about is my 3 photoshoots. First, I'll talk about my night photo shoot, and this is done with Ryuki, and I had the boyfriend Amos to help me out in this particular shoot here. As you can see in this really quirky shot, this is how it looks like before edit and after edit in Lightroom. You can see that I actually raised the brightness quite a little bit and raised the shadows quite a little bit to see the details in the forest and stuff. This is shot with available lighting using 4 power tubes, as you can see. The shutter speed is 150 and it is shot at f1.2 using my 85mm RF. Now, for this shoot, the most important thing is that this shoot has been done with a 150 of a shutter with an 85mm lens at f1.2. I'm running on continuous AF. I did not even choose the AF point because it can always lock onto the eye for the entire shoot. It is quite reliable if you ask me. And considering that it's 150, there is high tendency that it will be soft, it will be out of focus because for whatever reason, this is not like a daylight shoot. So I'm really impressed with the R3 in this particular shoot because it is constantly always on the subject's eye. It is constantly always working properly in terms of his eye beats. I could easily capture shot at 150 of a second without any shot being soft. I have to say the truth. Out of the 40 or 50 shots for this particular shoot here, I had, I think, 1 shot that's only soft. So that is a very good in terms of autofocus at night, of course with LED lights. And of course also considering that it's running on IBs. If you have shot IBs on the Sony system, 85mm 150 of a shutter, high chance is that you will have more than 20 to 30% of a shot being soft. In this case, less than 5% is actually soft. In fact, let me think. Is it left 5%? I think it's like 2% that is being soft. So it is very impressive. And in terms of image quality, there is quite a little bit of recovery for this photo shoot. Let me show you a before and after. It is lifted 1 over stop in terms of its exposure, and then it's raised about some shadow amount so that you can see details behind. The colors are pushed. Overall, the shot looks really good. There is quite little noise. And the f1.2, let me show you the focus on the face. It is tack sharp on the face. In fact, the front of the person is slightly soft. That is how impressive the R3 autofocus is, even though it is not a very bright situation. Next, I will talk about my daylight shoot. And in this daylight shoot, there are some backlit shots. There are, of course, just now the spinning shots that I have shown you just now for the autofocus test. And then in this particular section, I will talk about is recovery of shadows, is dynamic range in real world. Is it really good enough? And I can tell you that it is good enough. In fact, let me show you the settings for some of my photos here. You can see that I raise exposure, raise shadow significantly, reduce highlight significantly, and I get the shots I want. Now, there is not much noise except in the hair. In certain parts of the hair, you can see a little bit of noise there, but if not, overall, the photo is quite clean throughout. Even in backlit scenarios, it can still autofocus properly, as in this case, you can see backlit. Of course, this 85 1.2 RF is not that affected by flare and stuff, and I also had a hood on, but still the subject is quite dark. As you can see, the subject is really dark compared to the brightness in the water and the sky, but the autofocus still carried on and worked perfectly. So very good performance for the R3 in terms of autofocus, shadow recovery, and overall bringing out highlights and dynamic range in real world photo shoot for the purpose of daylight available light portraits. Now the next one is a studio shoot, and in this studio shoot there is nothing much to talk about. It is f8. The only things I can say is that the autofocus is very reliable even on f8. I actually rely a lot on the eye detection, shifting of focus point, so that the focus system can more reliably lock on the face, because for some reason I noticed that when the character is dressed in certain ways, it just can't find the head reliably. So the best way to do it is to move the AF box near to the face, and then it will capture the eye quite well. And using the eye detection movement and repositioning of the AF box, it tends to work pretty good. So in this case, it worked really well for this photo shoot. Now, the most important part of this studio photo shoot, however, is looking at flash sync. Let me show you the flash sync of this camera itself. Firstly, the camera flash sync is about 200 using mechanical. And even though Canon say is 180 for electronic, there is no 180 setting in the camera itself. It is 160 or 200. So it's 160 with electronic shutter. So what happens if you don't set 160 for electronic shutter? If you set it 1200, you will see this black bar on the left side. And if you use mechanical shutter, the interesting part is on the right side instead, if you set 1250 over the flash sync. So what does it mean is that this camera flash sync isn't that impressive. In fact, the A1 spanks it, because the A1 does flash sync at 1200 for electronic, 1400 for mechanical. But my personal test is that when you do it at both ends, there seems to be some darkening at the side. So usually I drop a little bit. So in electronic, it is about the same. In mechanical, it's about 1360 or 1350. Significantly faster than the R3. So if you are a studio photo shoot user, sometimes the A1 may be a better choice, because you can raise the mechanical shutter higher just to do flash sync. But overall, the image quality across the three shoot, I will just say that it is impressive. It is no different from any other camera I've used so far. It doesn't seem to lose any dynamic range, even though in my previous video I did say that if you use electronic shutter mode and you raise the shadow significantly, you'll see certain amount of noise, and especially colored noise itself. I did notice that in real world, even with the backlit shots, dark face, raising 100% shadow, or even my night shoot where I raised significantly the exposure and of course raising the shadow itself, I didn't notice any distracting noise. In fact, if I zoom you in on some of my night shoot, really no such things. I would say it's more than capable for most portrait shoots, except for very extreme ones, which maybe then there's a difference. I'm not really sure what kind of photo shoots they are. Maybe if you need 100 megapixels, or maybe you need dynamic range more than 4 stops, so the GFX will be a better choice then. But if not, the R3 is a fantastic piece of equipment. So now, last section is a bonus section for some people who ask me questions. Firstly, is rolling shutter. So Now, testing the rolling shutter for the purpose of electronic shutter mode in terms of photography is a bit hard. So let me show you the rolling shutter in terms of its video functions. So I did a comparison with the A1 and the R3 just to make sure that I'm not wrong or cynical about the R3 itself. So because sometimes Canon just don't deliver. But when I compared with the A1, both of them had rolling shutter in video mode. The R3 seems to be really similar to the A1. As you can see here, I actually did a 10 times slow-mo for it. Some more just to let you guys see it. It is about the same. So the R3 and the A1 in terms of its rolling shutter for purpose of video at 50 frames a second is similar. And the next thing is somebody did ask me about raw footage. Now, I use Final Cut Pro, and Final Cut Pro can read the footage, but it cannot edit the footage. So I had to download DaVinci Resolve and what's not. So let me show you the raw footage before edit and the raw footage after edit. Now, this isn't the most perfect footage ever because I didn't have an ND filter. It was a last minute thing. So I just thought, hey, let's try out the raw footage. So I just took it at f16. So obviously it is not optimal, but it shows you the R6 raw footage capability. And of course, you know, I had the ability to tweak the color temperature, the ISO, and some of the parameters, and it looks pretty pleasing if you ask me. In fact, let me show you a video shot with my C70, which doesn't have raw footage, and using C-Log 2. So today there's Akira here. She's helping me in the review of this camera. This is the EOS R3. I'll do some photo shoot with my R3 with the 85mm 1.2, and she will help me out with this photo shoot. See you guys later. And that's about it for today's video. I will follow up with another video of the R3 in a week or two time, and then I will do a little bit more on my thoughts and the comparison with the Sony A1. Should you get an R3? Should you get an A1? Of course, you can ask me in the comments below. I can actually give you an answer if you know what's your priority, what's your preference, and what's your purpose. You know, I talked about the 3 Ps in my previous video. So if you know all these 3 Ps, tell me about it. I can actually recommend you, because I will tell you the truth. Really, the R3 is very good, really good for the purpose of my usage. And that's bye for today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.